Okay, today is the first day with adding and subtracting rational expressions. And what that is basically we're going to talk about being able to add or subtract fractions. Now, the fractions are going to be a little bit more complicated than what we're used to, but the skills and the ideas are all the same with any type of fraction. We just need to make sure that we're good and solid with those. So, first thing we're going to decide is can we add them? And then we're going to decide and we're going to decide and make a common denominator, and then we're going to add just a few of them. And then on the next video, you're going to have a little bit more complicated fractions to be able to add and subtract. But for today, we're going to keep it hopefully pretty straightforward. So here we go with this one. First of all, we have to decide, can I add or subtract these? And whenever you worry about adding and subtracting fractions, the first place I want you to look is I want you to look at the denominators. And so I'm going to focus right away on the denominators of this particular fraction. So I'm looking right here. And if those are the same, then this answer is yes. Yes, I can add those up. If they are different, then I cannot add those up. But right away, what I want to look at is just are they the same? And in this case, they happen to be the same, and so I'm great. So then on the next one, I looked at exactly the same place right here. And can I add these? I'm sorry. Yeah, I can. Matter of fact, when I add these up, in this particular case, my denominator is x minus 1. And what I do is I just add straight across. So x plus x is 2x. And then since there isn't anything else, so it's going to be 2x minus 2 would be that answer. But for right now, what we're going to really focus on is just making sure we get that common denominator and that we can do these particular problems. So can these be added or subtracted? As they are written, can I just start and do these problems? So again, I want, whenever I start talking about adding and subtract fractions, I want my eyes to go right to the denominator, and I compare those two denominators. Or if there's more than just two fractions, I compare all the denominators. Once I decide that yes, they are the same, then yes, I could just add these up. I could just add those up as they are right there. The next one, yep, those are the same. This would be a yes as well. And here, well, I definitely don't have the same thing. So no, I couldn't just simply add those up. I'm going to have to do some work to get a common denominator to be able to add these up. But in this case, for what I'm asking, that's just simply no. And then the last one here, those are different as well. So that's once again a no. So the first step to being able to do these things is taking your eyes to the denominator. Are they the same or are they different? If they're the same, I can do this right away. If they're different, then I have to do some things to get them to be the same. And so now what we're going to work on is, let's start with what is the common denominator. So when I look at this, what is the common denominator between these two things? Again, when I see add, I look at these two denominators and are they the same? And then this answer is no. Now, what I look for is the common denominator has to be as big as the biggest denominator. Everything has to divide evenly into the common denominator. By evenly, I want it to be an integer answer, a nice whole number answer. So when I look at these two, the 4 and the 2, well, they're not the same. So I have to figure out what their common denominator is. And what I'm looking for this one is simply what number do both of them, not necessarily just what number, but what's the first number? The first number always makes it easier. So if I can work a little harder here, finding the smallest common denominator, then I'll have a little less work to do as I start to do these problems. So with this particular one, I noticed the 4 and a 2. So my common denominator is going to be 4. With the next one, let's just try to get rid of that. Or let's not. With the next one, wow, those are definitely not the same. Those don't even look close to each other. So what I look at is, I look at the most complicated of the two denominators, which in this case happens to be this particular one. Now, in this case, I am taking two numbers, some number x plus 3. I don't know what that is, but that's one number. And I multiply it by some number x minus 1. So those are just two numbers. But when I look at them, they look very different. So my common denominator, I look over here, the other one only has one term, and this one has two. So I know right away, I see that both of them have x minus 1. So that's definitely got to be involved in my common denominator. Once I write it down once, I only have to put it down one time. So that x minus 1, that's in there already. And then the x plus 3, I have to have every denominator mentioned once in my common denominator. And so x minus 1 shows up twice, so I write it down one time. The x plus 3, that's the other half of it. And what I look for so many times is I just kind of compare them. What do I need to make both of them the same? Okay, so let's look at now. I have a whole list of them here trying to figure out what the common denominator is. And one of the things that I think is a key with this is if I have a fraction such as 1/3 plus 1/4, there are sometimes that common denominator is just simply the multiplication of the two numbers. So the common denominator in this case is 3 times 4. Well, that common denominator is 12. Well, when I have numbers like n plus 7 and n minus 2, those are very different numbers. I don't know what they are. So my common denominator, I don't use that same idea that I did here with the 3 and the 4. I'm just going to say the common denominator between these two is the two of them multiplied together. That's just so if I can't find an easier, smaller one, then that's the way I go. And that's what happens. And the good news, bad news is this happens a lot. This is, in some regards, this makes it really easy for me to find that common denominator because it's just the two of them. It's sometimes harder when they have something that they share. So this next one, well, they're not the same, so I couldn't add them. So I need to find a common denominator. And there's no way I can go from 8 to 5v minus 2 without just simply multiplying. So my common denominator is 8 times 5v minus 2. And that's it. For right now, that's what I want you to do. I want you to, what is that common denominator? How do I find it? Now, this third one here, I have 2x and 8. Well, I like to look at, I know that for sure I have an x in my common denominator. It has to be there because there's an x in one of them. And then I look at the numbers. What's the common denominator between 2 and 8? I could multiply them, say it's 16. The only bad thing about doing that is now I'm making the numbers larger than I have to. So if I can, I want to reduce as I go, not necessarily making these numbers too much larger. So the least common denominator is when I take 2 and divide it into 8. Well, that works. So my common denominator, my least common denominator for this one is 8x. And you'll find a lot of them will be like this, but for the majority, the top two are probably the most often type of denominators that you're going to see. Keeping that going. Now, one of the things that you have to do is you have to look at this and you have to be able to think, can I factor this? The 3, that's done. I know that 3, I know my common denominator is going to have a 3 in it because 3 shows up. It's got to be common, means it's in both. Now, 15x plus 3, that I think 3 will go into both those things. So if I take a 3 out, I end up with 5x plus 1. Now remember, I'm dividing both the 15 by 3 and the 3 by 3. That's how I got the 5 and the 1. Okay, so now I look, what's my common denominator have to be? Well, it has to be at least this one. And if I had to add something to it, then I would. So that ends up to be my common denominator because the 3 only has that 3, so I don't have to worry about that. So this is 3 parentheses 5x plus 1 for my common denominator. This next question is going to be similar. I see the 20x plus 16, and I'm going to focus on that one first to see if I can simplify this so I can find my common denominator really quickly. So both 20 and 16 are even, so I know I can divide it by 2. And I bet you I could take it up to something larger. I can divide both these by 4. So I have a 4 out. And what am I left with? 5x plus 4. Okay, so that's got to be my part of my common denominator. The other denominator was 2x. Well, 2 will go into 4, so I've taken care of the 2. I'm not worried about that. It's that x that I worry about. And the x here and the x in here, those are not the same. So I have to add an x to the outside here. So I would say my common denominator is 4x parentheses 5x plus 4. And the reason is because that x has to come out. So that's where that goes. Now, let's start getting into the nuts and bolts of this a little bit more. So let's actually do some of these problems. So the first step for me is my eyes go to denominators. I decide, are they the same or do I need to make them the same? In this case, they are the same. So I know my denominator is 30m. Now I look at my numerators, and honestly, once I get a common denominator, I'm just going to put together the things that can. As I look at this, I see a 5n and a 4n. Well, 5n plus 4n is 9n. And the 2m, that's just out here in front. Well, 2m plus 9n. Sorry about that. Now let's look at the next one. Again, eyes go to the denominator. They are exactly the same. So I'm going to write down my denominator first. Now what I do is I start to combine. This is add. So it's 4a plus 1a is 5a. Negative 5 plus -1 is -6. And I'm able to get my answer there. Here we are. Again, eyes go to the bottom. They're the same. So the bottom of my fraction is 12b plus 18. So now I look at the next thing. It's add. So b plus 4b is 5b. And the minus 3 just comes along. Denominators are same. N squared minus n minus 20. Now, n plus n is 2n. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. And, okay, not the same this time. So I start thinking, what is my common denominator? Well, I know that it has to be at least 3x because that's the biggest one. And I noticed the other one just is missing that 3. So I know my common denominator is 3x. And I like to put all my denominators down right away. So I have my fraction right there. So I can see all those things right away. So now what I do is I compare how's this 3x compared to this 3x. Or they're the same. So that means I know multiply by 1. So that means this is just a 2. Same thing. Now I look at this. What's this x missing that 3x has? Well, there's an x in both of them, so that's not missing. It's 3. So I need to multiply this by 3. 3 times 4 is 12. Once I get those denominators same, I do the operation it asked me to do, which was add. So 2 plus 12 is 14. Okay, this next one, I see an X in both of them, so I know I have an X in the bottom of my fraction. Okay, so now I look at what's the number, that's the first number that they both share. In other words, what's the first multiple of 4 and 6? Well, I've decided that is 12. Okay, 4 times 3 is 12, so I multiply this whole thing by 3. So 3 times 5x is 15x. 3 times negative 1 is negative 9. Excuse me, 3 times negative 9 is negative 3 is negative 9. Now I look at the next one. The x's are the same, so I need to multiply this by 2. So 15x, nothing. There is nothing over there. So I'm just going to write it as 15x. Negative 9 minus 2. So negative 9 plus negative 2 is negative 11. So there's my answer for that one. That one's a little trickier. Both these two don't have a common denominator. I got to think a little bit more on my feet when I come up with this. Okay, your worksheet today should be pretty similar to what you just practiced. Hopefully you find this video useful and you have a lot of success with this.